Hello there, and you're very welcome to another episode of the Arkham Avengers FFPL Podcast. You join me, the host, along with Eamon, Hector, and Captain Fantastical Mick, where we take a look to see how the managers in this league are getting on for the season. However, we'll also be talking about much more. So kick back, stay tuned, and enjoy. Welcome back, listeners, to another exciting episode of the Arkham Avengers Fantasy Football Premier League Podcast. Today we're diving deep into the thrilling world of Gameweek 3. There's no Captain Fantastical Mick with us as he's away, but he should be returning for the next episode. However, joining me are the usual suspects, Eamon and Hector. How are you both keeping?
Well, I have to say I'm doing great, thank you. It's nice to be here on the show again. Excited to have an opportunity to break down the highs and the lows of this game week's action.
Yes, indeed. Hello, everyone. Absolutely. When you look back at the game week, I think you realize it's been like the big wheel, the roller coaster ride going up and down for our managers. And I have to say, I'm ready to talk about it, to look at it all there. Fantastic stuff. Well, listen, I think we should just jump right on in. Game week 3 certainly brought its fair share of surprises with a mix of triumphs and challenges for our managers. Game week 3 saw the highest points at 128 and the average points settled at a modest 44. Eamon, can I ask what caught your eye in terms of a standout performance this game week for our managers?
I think the first thing that stands out is the number of managers who went with Haaland as their captain choice. I believe a total of 13 out of our 16 managers opted for him, and while he earned them 8 points, it might not have been the explosive performance that they were hoping for from him as such there. So it's something to bear in mind when you're selecting your captain. Is he the best? We touched on this in previous episodes, and I think it's something that it warrants careful consideration from a manager.
Absolutely. I think it was a bit of a mixed bag there. But speaking of standout performances, let's have a look at our managers. Saka's Steel still holding on to first place with an impressive 58 points. They're clearly doing something right, even though this might not have been their best week, Eamon. What do you think about it?
Well, they're a non-mover, as you said. They're still remaining at first place, and they had one transfer. Jackson came in for 7 points and Watkins went out for 5 points. They opted for Haaland as the captain. That was 8 points. Jackson, as I said, got them 7 points. Bruno Fernandes got 12 points. Rashford, 7. Saka picked up 8 points. Chilwell, 6 points. And their goalkeeper, Flecken, chipped in with 4 points there. Now, on the bench, Colwell was there with 6 points. And I think overall, the transfers worked out with bringing Jackson in and getting those 7 points. Now, 7 of the 11 players fielded brought in a reward this game week here. Haaland had the little slip up with the missed penalty, did cost them -2 points, but as you said, might not have been their best week. It certainly wasn't for Saliba and Stupian, but I think this manager will be happy to be holding on to first place for another week.
Definitely, and let's not forget about Taiega, who earned 52 points. They remain in second place. Despite being 11 points off the lead, they're making some smart transfers and it looks like they're starting to pay off for them. Hector, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, they had the 2 transfers. Foden they bring in for the 4 points and Salah they put out for the 5. Jackson they bring in for the 7 points and João Pedro went out for the 1 point. They also had Haaland as their captain for the 8 points. Jackson, as we said, they got the 7, Foden the 4. Saka had 8 points. Bruno Fernandes had 12 points and Chilwell had the 6 points there. I think perhaps you think maybe there might be smart transfers. I think leaving Salah in place would have worked out better, but the Jackson was a good transfer. Yes, they'll be only the 11 points off the first place and will be pleased with keeping in pace with the leader of the pack there. And they had 6 out of their 11 players really did the business this week here.
That's right. And then in third place, Silver Stroke, they got 56 points, 1 transfer, 1 step closer to the top. Would that be the case, Eamon?
Yeah, so they had a smart transfer, bringing in Ward-Prowse for 6 points. McAllister was put out for 2 points there. Now, they opted for Haaland as the captain, 8 points. Watkins at 5. Salah had 5, Saka had 8. As we said, Ward-Prowse brought in 6 points, and Cash had 17 points there. 6 out of their 11 players fielded really did well for this manager here. They're 3 points behind Tayega. They're only 14 points behind Saka's steal. This manager, as we said last season, showed glimpses of potential. They are really holding their own at the moment. This is game week 3. They're in 3rd place. They'll be very happy with where they are at the moment, considering the quality and the experience of some of the other managers behind them. And on the other hand, we have Bamford Rejects in 4th place, who racked up 45 points. The defence seems to be a concern for them, but they at least are holding their ground. Would you agree with that, Hector?
Well, they had no transfer for his start, and they held Haaland as the captain for 8 points. Watkins came in with 5. Saka had 8 points. Bruno Fernandes had 12, and Foden had the 4 points. They had Areola on the bench with 5 points, and 5 of their players did the business this week here. Yes, the defence and the goalkeepers, those 4 players only managed 4 points. My thinking on this, they're lucky to be in 4th place, and the defence needs to be addressed, and I think they need to start using the transfers there. Trollbuggers then has made the leap from 7th to 5th place. They got 51 points and they had 1 transfer. I think it's great to see their proactive approach starting to pay off. Eamon, would you agree with that?
Yes, I certainly would. It's a good move for them there. They've hit the top 5. They had 1 transfer. Salah came in for 1 point. Gabriel was put out. He didn't get any points. Haaland was the captain for 8 points. Watkins had 5 points. The donkey Fernandes came in with 12. Rashford had 7. Saka had 8. They had Chilwell with 6 points. And they had 6 players who brought in the points this week here, which, okay, you probably like to see maybe 7 or 8 at least, but we'll settle with the 6 there. I'm not sure about the transfer. Salah getting the 1 point is really not that effective for the overall team. We might have to think about changing this goalkeeper though. Onana at Man U is a liability in my book. I thought he would have been better, but he just seems to be faffing about all over the place. And I think he needs a shake-up there. Toeboggers, at least they'll be happy to have joined the 50 plus points gang this week, but it's just about. They made it by the 1 point. So they still have a little bit of work to be doing there.
Meanwhile, Raglan Road, they dropped down to 6th place. They managed 40 points. They had 1 transfer. If I look at their team, Hector, it's their subs bench would start to raise concerns, right? Yeah, they dropped down. They have 1 transfer. Akanji came in with no point. Shaw is out because he is injured. The Haaland was the captain for 8 points. Watkins is the 5. Rashford has 7 points. Saka have 8 points. The goalkeeper, Areola, had the 5 points. The transfer, in my view, did not work. They had 5 players who managed to nab points. The forward line looked good. The defence very poor. Some of the midfielders also had bad game weeks. And yes, I think that the subs bench need to be looked at. I would have concerns about it. There's not much there. There's not much cover. And that is a problem, I think, for this manager. They need to start thinking about sub bench, who is not being effective on pitch for them.
Absolutely. And talking about changes in fortune, finally got to have slipped from 6th down to 7th place with 42 points. The 2 transfers might have shaken their momentum a bit. Yes, they had the 2 transfers. Salah came in for 1 point. Gabriel went out, didn't get any points. Mememo came in for 2 points and Eze went out for 2 points. Now they opted for Saka as the captain. They got 16 points. So in that respect, they're thinking outside of the box. Haaland picked up 4 points and Bruno Fernandes got the 12 points. I'm not convinced with the transfers. They have the goalkeeper, Areola, sitting on the bench with 5 points. The defence and the goalkeeper were pretty poor. Another 4 points from 4 players. It's really not acceptable. It's not good enough. And after last week's storming up the table, I think they've stuttered this week. And they've been slightly blindsided. Maybe they were on a high. But this is the bump down to earth here again.
And Town is holding steady in 8th place with 48 points. Now, even though they could use a more solid game week, the transfers might be starting to work for them. They had, yes, the 2 transfers. The Chilwell came in for 6 points. The Shaw is out. He's injured. They also brought in Mememo. He got the 2 points. So Zvasla went out for 2 points. Haaland was the captain for 8 points. Jackson came in with 7 points. Maddison had 10 points. Rashford had 7. Chilwell had 6 points. And their goalkeeper Flecken had the 4 points. The Chilwell transfer was good. I'm not too sure about the other one at the moment, but I think Memo will probably be the better player to bring in there. At least they had 6 out of the 11 players fielded who are doing the business and getting points this week. Very nice to have that there. They also had Diaby sitting on the bench, and he had 12 points. It'd be very nice to have him on the pitch, and maybe they need to think about moving him out and someone else to the sub bench. I think, though, there is yet again another week where they're just managing to get slightly above the weekly average. And yes, I think they do need to get a solid result from the next game week. Just, to settle them, to get them going. Instead of being average, let's see how good they can go. Blightsome Squad, on the other hand, got 43 points and they remain in 9th place. Now, they opted for Matoma as their captain. That didn't quite work out. And I suppose we'll have to wonder if there are some possible player changes on the horizon. Yeah, they didn't have any transfer this week, and you're right, they went for Matoma as their captain and got 2 points. Watkins was there with 5 points, Darwin had 11 points, Saka had 8, Rashford had 7, and Salah had 5 points. Matoma is the captain, and it didn't work. It was a bit of a nightmare, I have to say, and he really flopped as a captain there. But I understand where the manager was coming from. On previous form, you'd expect better from him. Brighton really just, I don't know, they were all over the place and they just didn't gel. Things did not work for them there. Now, this manager had 5 out of their 11 players who managed to get, anyways, decent points. Now, Darwin was a super sub. Kudos to the manager for having him, maybe have him on the pitch, but they had him as a sub and he came on. The defence and the goalkeeper, again, like some of the other managers, not great. 4 points from the 4 players, that's just not acceptable. It's not good enough at this level here. And I think because we didn't see any transfer this week, this manager is probably saving up their transfers in order to make necessary adjustments to their team in game week 4. João Pedro, to me, looks like a fella who's already halfway out the door with this manager, and I wouldn't blame them to be shipping him out. He's ineffective at the moment. What a Beauty 99 managed to maintain 10th place at the moment with 40 points and did 2 transfers. It's a tough week, but at least they're holding their ground, aren't they? I don't know, to be quite honest with you about that, but they had the 2 transfers. Saliba had the 1 point, Timber is out, he is injured. Ward-Prowse brought in for 6 points and McAllister was out with the 2 point. Haaland was the captain, 8 points. Watkins was there with 5. Saka had 8. As we said, Ward-Prowse had these 6 points. And they had Salah there with the 5 points. They got points from the transfers, which is good. And the midfield, it's holding okay, looking good. Again, they only had 5 players out of their 11 who managed to get, anyway decent points. They have a weak defence. You're right. They are holding 10th place. They should be pleased with that. But I think, though, they are not on steady ground. So they're going to have to watch what they do next. AFC Tunali joined them in 10th place with 49 points, although their captain change and transfers didn't exactly pan out, did they? I mean, they've moved up from 13th place, though. So kudos for an active approach to this game week. But could things have been a little bit better, Eamon? Well, their transfer activity was Estupian, in for 1 point, and Stones was sent out. He's injured, of course. Haaland was the captain for 8 points. Darwin was there with 11. Rashford had 7 points. Saka had 8 points. The goalkeeper, Sanchez, managed to pick up 6 points there. The transfer for me was a waste of time. If you're only going to get 1 point out of a fella, you're nearly better off to leave the injured guy there and save up your transfer for another week, because it's 1 point. Unless it's the last game week of the season and you need that point to win, this transfer was a bit of a waste. But they got a point. That's that. 5 of their players managed to bring in some decent points there. The defence is very weak. And there's not much happening on that subs bench either. And again, like Raglan, this is a concern. I think a manager should be thinking about that there. You're right. We give them kudos because they were active this game week with a transfer and also that captain selection. At least they're doing something. That's what I like to see with this manager. Well, Eamon, if that's what you like with that manager, the surprises keep on coming because Arkham Avengers decided to play their wildcard this week and only managed a disappointing 35 points. It was a bold move, but it didn't pay off as expected, did it? Eamon, are you coming straight in? I would like to come in if I can. Hector, would you mind if I spoke? No, that's quite all right. I'll take the next one if you want. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Yes, the spoofer.
Yeah, I'm talking to him. I'm sure he's listening to this. Haaland was the captain for 8 points. Foden got 4, Rashford 7, and Chilwell got 6 points. If we throw in Caicedo, he managed to get 3 points. I think it's very early in the season to be playing a wild card. And 35 points is just a ridiculous, shoddy return. Players didn't perform. They had 4 out of 11 players who managed to get a couple of decent points. 5 if you want to add in Caicedo, and he only got 3 points there. But you look at the bench. The goalkeeper, Areola, got 5 points. Jackson had 7. And Porro had 6 points. That's 18 points the manager could have had if those lads were playing there. But he didn't have them on there. They're not going to be concerned about their bench, but I think they need to be concerned about the players that they have on the pitch there. A lot of lads blanking this week. They're 64 points behind first place at the moment and 53 behind second. And come game week 4, the spoofer really needs a top class set of results from those players that are out there. The spoofer is down. The spoofer is on the ropes. He's just about hanging on to any chance of making a comeback. And you're right, the spoofer never fails to surprise us. And I'll be interested to see, is this a kind of a Rocky Balboa comeback here? Rocky 2, spoofer is back for another round.
Meanwhile, Lafayette Lions dropped from 11th down to 13th place with a mere 29 points. Their transfer choices backfired, without a doubt. And look, I think they're facing a challenge here. Would you agree, Hector, with me on this?
Yeah, they bring in the Solanke for 2 points and they put the Darwin out who got 11 points. Haaland was their captain for 8 points. Rashford had 7 points and the Son had 3 points. The only thing I can see about the transfer is it was a disaster. And pretty much the defence, the goalkeeper, most of the midfield, they just look a wreck. They look like, I don't know, you'd be no better off with no player in those lot. On the bench, Jackson was there with 7 points. That would have, probably as Eamon would say, on the Mick, put a band-aid over what was a shocking team result. 2 players, they managed the 8 points and the 7. You put in the Son, he got the 3 points to make things look half respectable, but it doesn't really work. It's 2 weeks with 2 poor transfers. Yes, there is a challenge here, and this manager have a lot of work to do.
Udenicus, though, are on the rise. They're 14th with 50 points. They had 1 transfer. Things are looking quite positive for this manager.
Yeah, well, they had 1 transfer. Mememo came in for 2 points and Martinelli went out for 2 points. Haaland was the captain for 8 points. Watkins came in with 5. Saka had 8. Rodrigo had 10 points. Rashford had 7. And the goalkeeper, Alisson, had 5 points. Not sure about the transfer. You put out a player who got 2 points. You get a fella in who gets you 2 points. So it just equals it out. But they had 6 of 11 players who were actually doing the business and getting points. We commented last week that they brought in players to get a result. And so far, it's working. At least they're rising here. And this is what this manager needs to get moving up that table. They're doing it slowly, but they have plenty of time in the season for this. Things are looking positive.
Mexican Amigos, though, well, they look like they're facing a really tough situation here, lads. Dropping to 15th from 14th, they only got 38 points and they have a suspended Tony on this team. Are we looking at changes? Desperate changes need to be made to this squad.
You mentioned the Tony. This manager do 1 transfer this week. 1. They bring in the Tony who is suspended. He's not coming back to play football till sometime in January next year. They put out the Kane because he had playing his football in Germany. They had Haaland as the captain for 8 points. Bruno Fernandes pick up 12 and Bueno gets 6 points. I find very hard to find words. I do not know what was going on with the transfer to bring Tony in because the manager should have known he cannot play. Why you bring him in? You have one man who has left the country and you're bringing in another guy to come in who can't play. I do not know what is the mental of that. 3 players only managed to get 2 points. Okay, Son was there. He got 3 points. We make it 4. Okay, it's not so bad. Not so good either. But I think there are 5 players who need to be shown where the door is in order to try and steady things here. Never mind this manager trying to finish in the top 10. They need to steady things at the moment. They need to make some smart transfers. Okay, maybe they lose a point here or there, but they have to do something here at this moment.
they can still get into the top 10. It's not out of their reach, but they have to start to apply themselves a bit on this. That is my saying on this. Will you agree with me on this, Eamon?
Yes, I certainly would agree with you. There's no sense, no logic to bringing in Tony. I stumped. I don't know what they're thinking of. Somebody's giving them some bad advice, but they would have seen or noticed the red flag that Tony was suspended. So maybe they didn't have their glasses on. I'm not too sure, but it's a waste of a transfer. I haven't seen a transfer like this in a long time. Doesn't make any sense. I agree with Hector. There's players that need to be shipped out of that team there.
And lastly, Flores Rovers remains in 16th place with 43 points. There's a curious thing going on here because Harry Kane is still the captain, even though he plays in Germany. And there's another factor here. There's a lot of injuries starting to mount up for this manager.
Yes, they didn't do any transfers. You're right. Kane is still the captain. I don't know what's going on there. I mean, we've gone from Kane being shipped out and Tony brought in, and now we have Kane for this manager still left as captain. And again, I'm stumped. I don't know. Clearly this manager isn't paying attention. Clearly this manager isn't listening to us. Haaland was there with 4 points. Rashford had 7. Saka had 8 points. Anderson had 11 points. And Alisson Becker, the goalkeeper, was the vice captain. He picked up 10 points. Okay, positive thing number 1. Points-wise, they're doing better than last week. There are 5 players who managed to get the bulk of the points. I'm not going to say anything further about the captain other than get him out, get him changed. There are a lot of injuries and the manager needs to address this. And I think the starting point here is starting to use the transfers. They should have 2 transfers. Start using those.
Thank you, Eamon, for that. It's great to hear that. So, wow, what a week it's been. Ups, downs, surprises, setbacks. That's the essence of fantasy football, and especially for game week 3. As always, lads, thanks for joining me as we analysed and dissected the action from this week.
Well, it's always a pleasure to analyse the strategies and the outcomes of our managers. It can be a roller coaster at times, especially when you see Kane as a captain and wildcards being used. It's not boring, that's for sure.
Yeah, I agree with him, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to seeing what our managers do and how they adapt for game week 4. Indeed, yeah, well, that's going to be rolling around very quickly there. And now, listeners, it's time to turn things over to Hector for our segment we all love and know. It's Hector's Hello. Thanks very much, host, and hello to everyone. It is that time again where we give big shout to all our listeners around the world. So without the further ado, I just say to all our fellow listeners in New Mexico, keep on rocking, all good, keep listening to us. Our listeners in Brazil, how you doing? And special note to my mama, Mom, hope you're doing well and enjoying the beautiful game and listening to me as I say the hellos out there. We're sending the waves to Los Angeles and to San Francisco. And, we have a hearty hello to all our listeners who are tuning in from Nixa, Missouri. And we appreciate you listening and your support. Greetings then to the Big Apple over there, our listeners in New York. You're always in the spotlight. I say hola to our friends in Chile and to our listeners in Canada. I give you a big wave and a salute there, and also to your northern neighbours. We have our listeners in Greenland. Then I say big hi to all our listeners in South Africa, and thrilled to have you joining us. And then we have our listeners in Australia, Japan, in India. We have our listeners in Frankfurt on Main in Germany. Pleased to have your, football experience from Germany there, and glad to have you on board as our listeners. Shout out to our friends in Italy. Hello to our listeners in Kent, and all our listeners in the bustling streets of London, Newcastle and Liverpool. And I give big shout out to our listeners in the tranquil Shetland Islands. How very nice to have you listening to us. Hola to all our listeners in Spain and Portugal, and bonjour to our listeners in France. Very pleased to have you with us also. It's great to have you aboard and listening to us on the podcast here. And then we turn here to our listeners in the Emerald Isle. We have our listeners in County Donegal, Mayo, Cavan, Monaghan, our listeners in Carlow, Tipperary, Cork and Kerry, Galway, Longford, Dublin, and finally in Offaly. Remember, if you want to reach out, share your thoughts, or simply say hi, or you want me to give a shout out to you wherever you are in the world, and don't hesitate to drop us an email at Arkham Avengers FFPL ffpl@gmail.com. And until the next time, take it handy. Ciao from Hector's hellos. Well, Hector, I have to say, that was a slightly different approach to normal weeks. What's this? Hola and ciao. I'm trying to engage with the listeners a little bit more.
Engage with them? I thought you were going to turn them off. I didn't know what I thought this was starting to sound like the Eurovision. Hola, Spain. Hola, Portugal. Bonjour, France.
I'm trying to broaden my wording. So, it's very nice,
I tell you something. Come next year, you might be handing in the Eurovision points from Ireland.
Well, if they want me to do it, I could do it. Hector, I think Eamon is joking there. Oh, I see.
Listen, Hector, thank you very much for that. So it was great for you to give a shout out to all our listeners around the world there. And folks, that's a wrap for this week's show. Do stay tuned for more exciting Arkham Avengers FFPL updates, news and analysis next week. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining us, following us, and don't forget to mention us to any of your family and friends there. And all that remains for me to say is have a good morning, a good afternoon, a good evening, and a good night. Mind yourselves. Stay safe. We'll be back. Slán.